Welcome back for my 3-star book reviews. So these are kind of meh. They have some good information, but there were parts that definitely took the review down. So these are just going to be very brief. I am going to split this into 2 parts because I have a lot of them. So I'm just gonna pick like 1 or 2 points per book to just briefly mention. Any that you want to learn more about, I will link in the description. But yeah, there's a lot of these, so we're going to do the first 16 today. So number 1 is the Practical Candle Burning Rituals by Buckland. This book is just not really explained well for beginners, to be honest. And the biggest thing is that half the book is Christian. So if you're a Christian witch, great resource. If you're not, and most of us are not, and in fact would not want to include any Christian stuff in our practice, it's literally you only have like that much of a book that might be worth flipping through at most. Then we have The Magical Household by Scott Cunningham, and this is one of those where I usually love Scott Cunningham, but there's just no depth to this book. Everything was just like a brief idea and that was it. Like a sentence or two, maybe a paragraph, and that was about it. Which just, it didn't really jive with me. Then we have Rune Mysteries. This was a book that is actually supposed to be for like a guidebook with a rune set thing, but it's out of print. And so you do have to keep that in mind because like it does get really expensive. I bought mine for like, I think 50 bucks-ish, and I've seen it go up to like 500. So like this book can get very expensive. Not necessarily worth it. Like, it does have some interesting stuff, like it does include like colors and crystal associations to each rune, but it's also like the stuff at the end of the book is very heavily Wiccan, and honestly I was kind of hoping this book to feel more like a Silver Ravenwolf book, and it definitely was the other author. Then we have The Modern Witchcraft Guide to the Runes. This book, again, I was kind of assuming that when you talk about the runes, you're going to talk about like the Futhark runes, but instead they talked about anything that's an alphabet basically that would be used in witchcraft. And even then it was just kind of like, not the best one. I would definitely recommend other ones, at least for the like Elder Futhark runes. As for the Ogham, I have no idea, haven't looked into those. And so then there's also other ones like you could use various other alphabets, but like, and then you have like the modern like witches runes, which I don't use. Then we have one that I don't know if I would have kept this review the same at this point, because I am a little more picky on things, but it is in my 3-star category. So this is the Book of Kitchen Witchery by Cerridwen Greenleaf. She's got issues. So potentially dangerous information in her book. So she has like herbs that can help with certain diseases like type 2 diabetes, with no warnings. No warnings at all on any of the herbs she's telling you to do, which is a red flag. She also constantly encourages you to go and make your own alcohol. Again, that can turn poisonous real quick. She does that a lot in her writing, so that's kind of a bummer. And then also, like, she has some weird, like, usually she seems like a Wiccan author, but then her spells in this book in particular were just, like, very side-eye, to say the least. For example, 1 to bind my love forever bound to me. That doesn't sound consenting, to say the least. Then we have The Art of Divination by Scott Cunningham. This was another one he really didn't go into a lot of depth with, and there really wasn't like anything on like, okay, there was some things, but I figured it would go more into depth of like the divination tools that are commonly used, and instead it was more just like super random like sentence or 2 explanations of like how to get yes or no with like fire and paper, and just like really random. Then we have the Pagan Portals book for the Morrigan. I don't like Pagan Portal books, I think, because there's such an emphasis on the mythology, and for me that's like a small portion of any part of working with a deity. Is it important to know? Sure. Is it really the highest emphasis? Not really, because most of the mythology is like so construed and changed and translated wrong and written down in a very biased fashion. Why are we putting it on such a pedestal? Because like we know that it's been changed. So I have a struggle with that for any book that puts such an emphasis on the mythology, but then it doesn't even explain the mythology terribly well. It assumes you already know how the myth is working within the huge network of the like culture that they're coming from. And I don't know a whole lot about Irish mythology, so you're just lost all the time. Then we have part of the Sabbat, I think it was the Sabbat Essential books by Llewellyn, the little ones that I did last year. So we have Lughnasadh. I didn't love this. So it really only focused on like the same two deities. So you either have the Lord and the Lady, whatever. But then it only focused on Lugh and I think it was Daniel as like the god and goddess, and that was it. And also it talked about how that was the season of weddings. And at the time, like I'm getting ready to get married and I was like, oh my god, cool. And then it did nothing with the information. It was a bummer, and like the wedding ritual that they have is really just like built in. It wasn't even actually a wedding, so that was a bummer. Then we have Saga of the Volsungs. I know I'm mispronouncing it, but it's the translation by Crawford. I need the stories to be written by somebody like Neil Gaiman. I'm sure the story could be interesting, but direct translation, it's so boring. Like, I don't know how anyone gets all of this information out of these like couple sources for the Norse, because I'm like, where did you read that? Like, what? It's so boring. And I think it does come down to personal preference. I've never liked academic reading. I feel like people just make it really complicated just to do that. And I do prefer the dumbed down edition, because that actually means you know what you're talking about. If you can dumb it down for like the average person to handle, we don't need to like talk above everybody. Then we have Mabon. It was a bad book. It was also the Sabbat Essentials. So this one had such an emphasis on other beliefs. So there was so much on Jewish and Christian culture and practices and holidays and beliefs behind those holidays. And I'm like, but I'm here for a pagan book. I don't care about Easter and Christian things and Jewish things. Like, I'm here for pagan things. The author missed the mark. Then we have The Year of the Witch. It was just really poorly marketed. I don't know if that's down to the publisher or the author, but it's presented as if it's going to be a book on the Wheel of the Year. It's not. It's a beginner 101 book. Also, she has some really alarming thoughts, such as climate change denial completely. That's fun. Environmentalism is like really big. And then also the most fun is that medication blocks your magic, so just be cautious. Then we have Curses, Hexes, and Crossing, and this is one of those books I really wanted to DNF, do not finish, because it is so bad, but like the content is definitely for a different set of magic practitioners, and I'm not them. And it's definitely more for like the Luciferian, Satanism, demonology people over there, not witches. And the bigger problem is their attitude towards like Wiccans and pagans and witches who don't want to do curses. It's very much this better than thou and like talking down to you attitude, and so condescending all the time, and just like, well, I am obviously the best. And that gets really old, and the writing never changed from that tone, and I really hated it. But it's like, I know I'm not the intended audience, but like, it was still pretty bad. Like, you don't need to talk down to other religions that are like so closely tied to yours. And you should have maybe marketed that better. And it's definitely self-published too, so that might fall on the author as well, more than like a publishing house. Then we have Norse Magic by Conway. This is Wicca with Norse paint. Completely. Like, there's no way she analyzed these myths at all and just handpicked a few gods and fit them into the Wiccan narrative of the triple goddess, the triple god, and the Wheel of the Year to fit with that narrative. Then we have The Mighty Dead by Penczak. I'm not here for Ascended Masters and the Kabbalah. That's just not something I'm into. And that's all this book was. And I really thought The Mighty Dead was going to be talking about like honoring your ancestors and death and that discussion, and like the funeral stuff in there was like so not helpful. And it's really just about honoring like the specific people too, because it was like the turn of the previous century people. So like Crowley and Fortune, which is fine, but there was also newer names we could have added to that list. So it's just not a book for me, and it's not what I thought it was going to be. Then we have the Llewellyn's book for Samhain. It's the same author who did Mabon, same problems. And then lastly we have Being in Balance, And this book is just your typical run-of-the-mill law of attraction book. The only difference is that it does have a very heavy Christian background to it. So anything you're doing is like with God, and I just hated it and I got rid of it because no. So that is part 1 of my 3-star books. I would love to hear what your 3-star like witchy books are. Again, if you want any of the ones that I talked about, I will have it in the description down below so you can watch the full review of any of them. Huge thank you to my patrons. I'll have their names here on the screen. If you'd like to support me and get access to exclusive content, it is patreon.com/nightwillowcrafts. Make sure to like and subscribe. I post every single day. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and blessed be.